Edward Paul wiped the grease from his hands, the rag leaving dark smudges on his calloused skin. The setting sun painted the small workshop in hues of amber, its light glinting off the chrome of half-dismantled engines. He glanced at the clock. 6:30 p.m. Another day done. As he locked up the garage, the quiet streets of Millbrook, Iowa stretched before him, the same roads he'd walked 1,000 times, lined with the same quaint houses and familiar faces. Edward nodded to Mrs. Henderson, watering her prized petunias, the routine so ingrained he barely registered the action. His apartment sat above Gus's hardware, a climb up creaky wooden stairs that groaned under his weight. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of motor oil that clung to his clothes and the lingering aroma of last night's pizza. Edward's eyes fell on the calendar hanging crooked on the wall. July 15th, 2024. Another day, indistinguishable from the last. He showered quickly, trading grease-stained coveralls for a plain t-shirt and jeans. As he toweled his hair dry, a flyer on the fridge caught his eye. Annual Millbrook Flea Market. Tonight. Why not? Edward muttered to himself, grabbing his keys. Maybe he'd find some old car parts to tinker with. The town square buzzed with activity, a stark contrast to its usual sleepy demeanor. Folding tables groaned under the weight of knickknacks and second-hand treasures. Edward wandered aimlessly, his fingers trailing over dusty book spines and tarnished silverware. "Anything catch your eye, son?" A gravelly voice startled him. Edward turned to face an ancient man, his wrinkled face nearly hidden beneath a scraggly white beard. "Just browsing," Edward replied with a shrug. The old man's eyes twinkled. "Maybe you just haven't found what you're looking for yet." He reached beneath the table, producing a bottle that seemed to shimmer in the fading daylight. Edward's breath caught. The bottle gleamed with an impossible array of colors, shifting and dancing as if alive. Intricate patterns etched its surface, unlike any language he'd ever seen. "What is it?" Edward asked, unable to tear his eyes away. The old man chuckled. "Oh, just an old curio. But she's been waiting for you, I think." Edward's brow furrowed. "Waiting for me? What do you mean?" "Some things choose their owners, boy. This one's had its eye on you since you walked in." The man held out the bottle. "Yours for $20 if you want it." Edward hesitated, his practical nature warring with an inexplicable pull. "I don't know. Trust me," the old man winked. "You won't regret it." Before he could second-guess himself, Edward found himself handing over a crumpled $20 bill. The bottle felt unexpectedly warm in his hands. "Enjoy," the old man said with a cryptic smile. When Edward looked up to ask another question, the entire stall had vanished, leaving only an empty space between a table of hand-knitted scarves and a display of vintage records. Edward blinked, disoriented. He glanced down at the bottle, half expecting it to have disappeared as well, but it remained, pulsing with an otherworldly glow. The walk home passed in a daze, the bottle a comforting weight in his jacket pocket. Once inside his apartment, Edward placed it carefully on the kitchen counter. Under the harsh fluorescent light, the colors seemed even more vibrant, swirling hypnotically. He ran his fingers over the strange symbols etched into the glass. They resembled no alphabet he'd ever seen, more like intricate constellations than letters. As he traced one particularly elaborate design, a jolt of static electricity sparked beneath his fingertip. "Ouch!" Edward jerked his hand back. The bottle wobbled precariously, and he lunged to catch it. As his palm connected with the smooth glass, the top flew off with a resounding pop. A blinding light erupted from the bottle's mouth, filling the small kitchen. Edward stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. When the glow finally subsided, he lowered his arm, blinking furiously to clear the spots from his vision. What he saw made him question his sanity. Floating a few inches above his linoleum floor was a woman. No, not a woman. Something decidedly otherworldly. Her skin shimmered with an electric blue luminescence, as if billions of tiny stars danced just beneath the surface. Cascading white hair floated around her face, defying gravity. Her eyes, when they met his, were infinite pools of swirling galaxies. Edward's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his brain refusing to process the impossible sight before him. The being tilted her head, regarding him with curiosity. When she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonics that sent shivers down Edward's spine. "I am Jenna," she said, her lips not quite syncing with the words. "You have awakened me from my slumber, mortal. By the ancient cosmic laws, I am bound to grant you 3 wishes." Edward stumbled backward until his back hit the refrigerator. A cascade of takeout menus and unpaid bills fluttered to the floor. "I... you... what?" Jenna's brow furrowed slightly. "Have I used the incorrect language? My translation matrix may need calibration." She waved a hand and suddenly Edward felt a tingling sensation in his ears. "Is this better?" To his amazement, her words now matched the movement of her mouth perfectly. Yes," Edward managed. "But who are you? What are you?" A hint of amusement flickered across Jenna's ethereal features. "I am a quantum jinn, a being of energy and possibility. Your kind might call me a genie, though that term lacks nuance." Edward's mind reeled, grasping for some semblance of logic. "But genies aren't real. This can't be happening." Jenna raised an eyebrow, the gesture oddly human. "And yet here I am. Your disbelief, while understandable, does not negate my existence." Edward ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small kitchen. Okay. Let's say, hypothetically, that you are real. You mentioned wishes?" Jenna nodded. 3 wishes, to be precise. It is the cosmic bargain. Freedom in exchange for wish fulfillment. Edward's mind raced with possibilities. Unlimited wealth, superpowers, the ability to fix any machine with a touch, but a lifetime of small-town practicality held him back. This was too good to be true. There had to be a catch. "What's the fine print?" he asked, crossing his arms. There are always strings attached in stories like this. Jenna's lips quirked in what might have been approval. "Clever mortal, there are indeed limitations. I cannot bring back the dead, force love, or directly cause harm. Beyond that, the possibilities are vast, but often unpredictable. Wishes have a way of twisting themselves." Edward nodded slowly, processing the information. "And what happens after the 3 wishes? You just disappear?" A flicker of something, longing, sadness, passed across Jenna's face. "I returned to my bottle, awaiting the next summoner. It is the way of things." Edward frowned. The idea of trapping this fascinating being back in that tiny prison didn't sit right with him. "That sounds awful. Isn't there any way to free you?" Jenna's eyes widened in surprise. "You would consider such a thing? Most mortals think only of their own desires." Edward shrugged. "It just doesn't seem fair is all, to be stuck granting other people's wishes for eternity." Jenna studied him intently, as if seeing him for the first time. "You are unusual, Edward Paul. Wait, how do you know my name?" A ghost of a smile played on Jenna's lips. "I know many things about you. It is part of the bonding process between Jinn and Summoner." Edward felt a blush creep up his neck. "That's a little unsettling." Jenna tilted her head. "I apologize if I have caused discomfort. Perhaps we could talk? It has been a long time since I've engaged in conversation beyond wish negotiations." Edward hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, why not? It's not like I had big plans for my Friday night anyway." He gestured to the small kitchen table. Can you sit?" Jenna gracefully lowered herself into a chair, her form solidifying slightly as she did so. Edward sat across from her, acutely aware of how surreal the situation was. "So," he began awkwardly, "what's it like, being a quantum jinn?" Jenna's eyes lit up, quite literally with swirling constellations. "It is difficult to describe in terms your 3-dimensional mind can comprehend. I exist simultaneously across multiple planes of reality, my essence woven into the very fabric of the cosmos." Edward blinked. Uh, Maybe we could start with something simpler. How long have you been doing this genie thing?" Jenna's brow furrowed in concentration. "Time is fluid for beings such as myself. But in your linear perception, it would be millions of your Earth years, I believe." Edward whistled low. That's a long time. You must have seen some crazy wishes in all that time. A smile played at the corners of Jenna's mouth. Indeed, mortals are endlessly creative in their desires, though often short-sighted in their execution. Any favorites? Edward found himself genuinely curious. Jenna's eyes took on a faraway look. There was a young pharaoh who wished for a monument that would stand for eternity. I may have over-delivered on that one. Edward's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying you built the pyramids? Jenna winked, a gesture that looked oddly charming on her otherworldly face. Let's just say I had a hand in their design. Edward leaned back in his chair, shaking his head in amazement. That's... wow. And here I am, just trying to keep old Chevys running. Jenna tilted her head, curious. You are a creator of sorts as well, are you not? I see images in your mind of intricate machines, brought back to life by your hands. Edward felt a flush of pride. I wouldn't go that far. I just fix things, make them work again when others have given up on them. A noble pursuit, Jenna said, her voice warm. The extension of usefulness, the preservation of function. These are not small things, Edward Paul. Edward rubbed the back of his neck, unused to such praise. Thanks, I guess. It's just not very exciting, you know? Same old cars, same old problems, day in and day out. Jenna leaned forward, her eyes intense. And is that why you hesitate to make a wish? You seek excitement, a break from the monotony of your existence? Edward started to deny it, but the words caught in his throat. Wasn't that exactly what he'd been feeling earlier? The suffocating sameness of his life in Millbrook? Maybe, he admitted, but I'm not sure a wish is the answer. Seems like a pretty big risk for a temporary thrill. Jenna nodded approvingly. Wisdom beyond your years, Edward Paul. Many have squandered their wishes on fleeting pleasures. Edward drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. So if wishes are so tricky, why do it at all? Why grant them? Jenna's expression turned somber. It is complicated. A cosmic bargain struck eons ago, a pact that binds my kind to serve as conduits of possibility. We channel the raw energy of creation, shaping it to mortal will. She sighed, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. But the power? It can be intoxicating. Many of my kin have been corrupted by it, delighting in the chaos their twisted wishes sow. Edward frowned. That sounds awful. Is there no way to break the pact? Jenna's eyes widened in surprise. You would consider such a thing? Most mortals think only of how to exploit our power, not free us from it. Edward shrugged. It just doesn't seem right, being forced to grant wishes for eternity. Everyone deserves a choice. Jenna studied him intently, something unreadable flickering in her cosmic gaze. You are different, Edward Paul. Your compassion is unexpected. Edward felt heat rise to his cheeks under her scrutiny. I'm just a guy who fixes things. If I see something broken, I want to make it right. A ghost of a smile played on Jenna's lips. And you see my situation as something to be fixed? Edward ran a hand through his hair, suddenly flustered. I mean, if there was a way, yeah, but I'm guessing it's not that simple. Jenna's expression turned thoughtful. There is one way, but it is rarely invoked and comes with its own complexities. Edward leaned forward, intrigued. What is it? Jenna hesitated, then spoke carefully. If a jinn were to bind themselves in marriage to a mortal, the nature of the wish-granting would change. The spouse would have access to unlimited wishes, but the jinn would no longer be bound to their bottle or to cosmic law. Edward's eyes widened. Wait, marriage? As in actual marriage? Jenna nodded. It is a joining of essences, a merging of mortal and cosmic energies. It has happened only a handful of times in all of history. Edward's mind reeled with the implications. And what happens to the jinn? Do they become human? Jenna shook her head. Not precisely. We retain our powers, but they become tethered to our mortal spouse. It is a profound connection, beyond what your kind typically experience in marriage. Edward stood up abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. That's a lot to take in. I mean, we just met. And you're talking about some kind of cosmic marriage? Jenna's eyes followed his movements, a hint of amusement in their depths. I merely explained the possibility, Edward Paul. I did not suggest we pursue it. Edward felt his face flush. Right, of course. I didn't mean to imply. I mean, you're beautiful and fascinating, but… He trailed off, mortified. Jenna's laughter filled the room, a sound like tinkling stardust. Your honesty is refreshing, Edward. Most mortals would have already proposed, seeking to exploit the loophole. Edward slumped back into his chair. I'm not most mortals, I guess. The idea of trapping you in a marriage just for wishes, it feels wrong. Jenna's expression softened. And that, Edward Paul, is why you are worthy of the power you now hold. Your compassion sets you apart. Edward met her gaze, struck by the depths of emotion he saw swirling in those cosmic eyes. So, what now? I still have 3 wishes, right? Jenna nodded. Indeed, the choice of how to use them remains yours. Edward took a deep breath. I think I need some time to think about it. This is all pretty overwhelming. Jenna inclined her head. A wise decision, rushed wishes often lead to regret. As if on cue, a clock in the living room chimed midnight. Edward startled, realizing how much time had passed. Wow, I didn't realize how late it got. Jenna's form began to shimmer slightly. The witching hour approaches. I must return to my vessel soon. Edward felt a pang of disappointment. Do you have to? I mean, can't you just stay out? Jenna shook her head, a hint of sadness in her eyes. The cosmic laws bind me. Without an active wish or other arrangements, I am tethered to the bottle. Edward nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. I understand. Will I see you again? Jenna smiled, the expression lighting up her entire being. You need only open the bottle, Edward Paul. I will always answer your call. As her form began to dissolve into mist, Edward felt a surge of panic. There was so much more he wanted to ask, to learn. Without thinking, he blurted out, Wait, I wish for you to be my wife. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Jenna's eyes widened in shock, her form solidifying once more. Edward, do you understand what you're asking? Edward's heart raced. He hadn't meant to say it, hadn't even fully formed the thought. But now that it was out there, I think I do. It means you'd be free, right? And we'd be connected somehow. Jenna's expression was unreadable. It is far more complex than that, Edward Paul. A binding beyond anything your kind typically experiences. Are you certain this is what you desire? Edward's words hung in the air, charged with potential. Jenna's cosmic eyes searched his face, probing for any hint of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she exhaled softly, a sound like distant starlight. Very well, Edward Paul, she said, her voice a mixture of wonder and trepidation. By the power vested in me by the cosmic laws, I accept your proposal. We are now bound in marriage for better or for worse, across dimensions and timelines. A shimmering thread of energy materialized between them, connecting Edward's chest to Jenna's. It pulsed with an otherworldly light before fading from view, leaving behind a tingling warmth. Edward blinked, his mind reeling. That's it? We're married. Jenna's lips quirked in amusement. Did you expect a more elaborate ceremony? I assure you this binding is far more profound than any mortal union. Right, Edward muttered, running a hand through his hair. So, what now? Jenna's form shimmered, solidifying into something more tangibly human-like. Her skin retained a faint blue luminescence, but no longer glowed with celestial fire. Now, Edward Paul, we navigate this new reality together. You have freed me from my bottle, but bound me to yourself in the process. It is an adjustment. The days that followed were a whirlwind of discovery and adaptation. Edward woke each morning, half expecting to find it had all been an elaborate dream. But there Jenna would be, perched on his worn sofa, poring over a stack of books on human customs and technology. I fail to understand the appeal of this reality television, Jenna remarked one evening, her brow furrowed as she watched a group of glamorous women bicker on screen. Is conflict truly so entertaining to your kind? Edward chuckled, settling beside her with a bowl of popcorn. It's not exactly high art, but sometimes it's fun to watch other people's drama instead of dealing with your own. Jenna tilted her head, considering. An intriguing coping mechanism, though I find your own life far more compelling than these artificial scenarios. Edward felt heat rise to his cheeks. Even after days in her presence, Jenna's frank observations still caught him off guard. Well, my life's gotten a lot more interesting lately, that's for sure. Jenna's lips curved in a small smile. Indeed, I must admit, I had not anticipated the complexity of human existence. Your world is simultaneously more mundane and more fascinating than I had imagined. As the days passed, Edward found himself falling into an unexpectedly domestic routine with his otherworldly bride. He taught Jenna the basics of cooking, marveling at her ability to perfectly replicate recipes after a single viewing. In return, she regaled him with tales of distant galaxies and long-extinct civilizations. You mean to tell me you were there when they built Stonehenge? Edward asked incredulously one night as they prepared dinner. Jenna nodded, deftly chopping vegetables. Indeed, though I must say, the purpose was far less mystical than your historians theorize. It was primarily a gathering place for interstellar merchants. Edward shook his head, grinning. You know, a month ago I would have thought you were crazy. Now, I'm not sure anything could surprise me. Jenna's eyes sparkled with mischief. Is that a challenge, Edward Paul? Before he could respond, Jenna waved her hand. The kitchen transformed, walls melting away to reveal a vast alien landscape. Purple grass swayed beneath twin moons, and creatures that defied description soared through a green sky. Edward gasped, nearly dropping the pan he was holding. Holy Language, dear husband, Jenna teased, returning the kitchen to normal with another gesture. I wouldn't want to corrupt your quaint Midwestern sensibilities. As the weeks went by, Edward found himself more and more captivated by Jenna. Her childlike wonder at human experiences was endearing, but it was her ancient wisdom and quick wit that truly drew him in. He began to look forward to their evening conversations, picking her brilliant mind on everything from philosophy to quantum mechanics. One balmy night, Edward suggested they climb up to the roof of his apartment building. Jenna's eyes lit up at the idea, and soon they were settled on a worn blanket, gazing up at the star-studded sky. It's beautiful, Edward murmured, his eyes fixed on the glittering expanse above. But I bet it's nothing compared to what you've seen out there. Jenna was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Beauty is relative, Edward. I have witnessed the birth and death of stars, seen galaxies collide in cosmic ballets. But there is a unique charm to viewing the universe from this perspective. Limited, yet full of wonder. Edward turned to look at her, struck by the play of starlight on her ethereal features. Do you miss it? Being out there, I mean. Jenna met his gaze, her eyes swirling with unreadable emotions. I am not certain. My existence before was vast, but often lonely. This new life, bound to Earth and to you, it is more constrained, yet somehow fuller. Edward's heart raced at her words. He reached out, hesitantly taking her hand. Jenna's fingers intertwined with his, a current of energy passing between them. Jenna, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I know this whole situation is crazy. We barely know each other, and I'm just a small-town mechanic, but I think I'm falling in love with you. Jenna's eyes widened, a cascade of shooting stars seeming to dance within their depths. Edward Paul, she whispered, I have existed for eons, observed countless lives and loves. Yet I find myself experiencing emotions I cannot fully comprehend. Is this what your kind calls love? Edward nodded, unable to find words. Jenna leaned in, her lips brushing his in a kiss that sent shock waves through his entire being. For a moment, Edward felt as if he could see the entire universe, countless realities stretching out before him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Wow, Edward managed, his mind spinning. That was... Indeed, Jenna agreed. a faint blush coloring her cheeks. It seems there is still much for both of us to discover. As they lay back on the blanket, hands still intertwined, Edward felt a sense of contentment he'd never known before. The quiet rhythms of small-town life that had once felt stifling now seemed peaceful, made richer by Jenna's presence. But their idyllic bubble was about to burst. The next morning, Edward woke to the sound of a commotion outside. He stumbled to the window, Jenna close behind him. A black van was parked across the street, and men in dark suits were questioning his neighbors. "Oh no," Jenna breathed, her form shimmering with agitation. "They found us." Edward's brow furrowed. "Who? What's going on?" Jenna's expression was grim. "Your government has detected my energy signature. I had hoped the binding of our marriage would mask it, but it seems I underestimated their technology." Edward's mind raced. "But they don't know about you specifically, right? We can just say it was a weird power surge or something?" Jenna shook her head. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. My presence on this planet violates numerous interstellar treaties. If they discover what I am—" She trailed off, her eyes filled with fear. Edward set his jaw, determination flooding through him. "Then we won't let them find out. You're my wife now, Jenna. I promise to protect you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." Jenna's eyes shimmered with emotion. "Edward, you don't understand the forces you'd be going up against. These aren't just human agencies. There are cosmic entities that would seek to reclaim me, to enforce the old laws." Edward took her hands in his, meeting her gaze steadily. "I don't care if we have to face down the entire universe. I'm not letting anyone take you away." A knock at the door made them both jump. "Mr. Paul," a stern voice called, "this is Agent Carter with the Department of Energy. We need to ask you a few questions about some unusual readings in the area." Edward and Jenna exchanged a panicked look. Time had run out. "Just a minute," Edward called, mind racing. He turned to Jenna, speaking in an urgent whisper. "Can you make yourself invisible or something?" Jenna shook her head. "Not without expending energy they would surely detect. Edward, perhaps it would be best if I—" "No," Edward cut her off firmly. "We're in this together. Just follow my lead, okay?" Jenna nodded, her form shimmering slightly as she adjusted her appearance to look more conventionally human. The ethereal glow of her skin dimmed, and her hair settled into a more earthly shade of blonde. Edward took a deep breath and opened the door. Two men in crisp suits stood in the hallway, their expressions impassive. "Mr. Paul," the taller of the two asked, "I'm Agent Carter, and this is my colleague, Agent Thompson. May we come in?" Edward forced a smile, stepping aside. "Of course, what's this all about?" The agents entered, their eyes immediately locking onto Jenna. Agent Carter's eyebrow raised a fraction. "I don't believe we've met, Mrs. Jenna corrected smoothly. "Jenna Paul. I'm Edward's wife." Agent Thompson consulted a tablet. "Interesting. Our records don't show any marriage license filed for Mr. Paul in the last, well, ever." Edward's heart raced. "We, eloped. It was all very sudden." Agent Carter's eyes narrowed. "I see. And when exactly did this whirlwind romance occur?" "2 weeks ago," Edward said, at the exact moment Jenna answered. "Last month." The agents exchanged a look. "Mr. and Mrs. Paul," Agent Carter said, his voice dripping with skepticism, "I'm going to need you both to come with us for some questioning. We've detected some highly unusual energy readings coming from this building, and your stories don't quite add up." Edward felt a surge of panic. He glanced at Jenna, saw the fear in her eyes. In that moment, he made a decision. "All right," he said, squaring his shoulders. "You want the truth? Here it is." With that, he turned to Jenna. "I wish for you to be free, truly, completely free, without any cosmic laws or obligations binding you." Jenna's eyes widened in shock. "Edward, no! You don't know what you're doing." But it was too late. The air crackled with energy, and Jenna's form began to glow with an intensity that forced everyone to shield their eyes. When the light faded, she stood transformed. Gone was any pretense of humanity. She hovered several inches off the ground, her skin a swirling map of galaxies, hair a cascade of starlight. The agent stumbled back, reaching for weapons that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. What? What are you? Agent Carter stammered. Jenna's voice resonated with power. I am a being beyond your comprehension, mortal. And thanks to Edward Paul, I am now unbound by any laws save those of my own choosing. She turned to Edward, her expression softening. You have given me a gift beyond measure, my love. But I'm afraid the consequences of this wish are far greater than you could have imagined. As if on cue, the sky outside darkened. Unearthly lights began to dance across the heavens, and a low thrumming filled the air. Jenna's eyes met Edward's, filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. They're coming. The cosmic enforcers, drawn by the disturbance in the universal balance. Edward, But before she could finish, a blinding light engulfed them all. Edward felt himself being pulled apart at the atomic level, his consciousness expanding to encompass realities he could never have imagined. The last thing he heard before everything went white was Jenna's voice, echoing across dimensions. Hold on, my love, our journey is only beginning. The blinding light faded, leaving Edward disoriented and gasping for breath. His vision cleared slowly, revealing a landscape that defied comprehension. Swirling nebulae stretched as far as the eye could see, punctuated by floating islands of impossible geometry. Edward's mind reeled, struggling to process the alien environment. Jenna, he called out, his voice echoing strangely in the cosmic expanse. Where are you? A familiar warmth enveloped him, and Jenna materialized beside him. Her form was even more ethereal here, her body composed of shimmering stardust and pulsing energy. I'm here, Edward, she said, her voice resonating on multiple frequencies. We've been transported to the Nexus, a realm between realities. The cosmic enforcers will arrive soon. Edward's head spun. Cosmic enforcers? Jenna, what's going on? What have I done? Jenna's expression was a mixture of love and concern. By freeing me completely, you've disrupted the balance of the universe. The enforcers are coming to restore order and to punish those responsible. Before Edward could respond, the air crackled with energy. 5 imposing figures materialized around them, each radiating power beyond mortal comprehension. Their forms shifted constantly, as if unable to settle on a single shape. The largest of the enforcers spoke, its voice booming across dimensions. Jenna, Quantum Jinn of the 7th realm, you stand accused of violating the cosmic compact. And you, Edward Paul of Earth, are charged with aiding and abetting this violation. How do you plead? Edward straightened his spine, facing the cosmic beings with a courage he didn't entirely feel. Not guilty. I love Jenna, and I won't apologize for setting her free. The enforcer's form pulsed with barely contained fury. Love? You speak of love when you've endangered the very fabric of reality. Jenna intertwined her fingers with Edward's, a gesture of defiance and unity. Your laws are outdated and cruel. I've found something more powerful than any cosmic compact. True connection with another being. The enforcers conferred in a language beyond human comprehension. Finally, the leader turned back to them. We cannot allow this disruption to stand. The balance must be restored. Jenna, you will be stripped of your powers and banished to a mortal existence. Edward Paul, you will forget all knowledge of cosmic truths and return to your mundane life. No! Edward shouted, pulling Jenna closer. You can't do this. There has to be another way. A smaller enforcer stepped forward, its form reminiscent of a shimmering humanoid. Perhaps there is an alternative. If you truly believe your love is strong enough to transcend cosmic law, prove it. How? Jenna asked, hope coloring her voice. The enforcer waved a hand, and a series of shimmering portals appeared. These gateways lead to different realities, each fraught with its own challenges. If you can navigate them together, maintaining your bond despite having your memories altered, we will consider your case. Unique. Edward met Jenna's gaze, saw the determination there that matched his own. We'll do it, he said firmly. The lead enforcer nodded gravely. Very well, but be warned. This trial will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Failure means permanent separation and the erasure of all you've shared. Before Edward could respond, he felt himself being pulled into the nearest portal. Jenna's hand slipped from his grasp as reality twisted and warped around them. Edward blinked, finding himself standing in a grimy alleyway. The acrid smell of pollution filled his nostrils, and neon signs flickered overhead. He wore a battered trench coat, and a futuristic gun hung at his hip. "Hey, Paul," a gruff voice called. "We got a lead on that alien fugitive. You coming or what?" Edward's head throbbed as conflicting memories battled for dominance. He was a small-town mechanic. No, a hardened detective in a cyberpunk metropolis. And he was searching for someone important. A woman with starlight in her hair? Shaking off the confusion, Edward followed his partner. Something told him this case was more than just another alien roundup. He had to find her, whoever she was. Everything depended on it. Across the city, in a dingy apartment, Jenna awoke with a start. Her once cosmic form was now undeniably human, complete with scars and cybernetic implants. She flexed her mechanical fingers, trying to remember how she got in them. A news broadcast caught her attention. Authorities continue the manhunt for the dangerous alien shapeshifter. Citizens are advised to report any suspicious activity. Jenna's heart raced. She was the shapeshifter, she realized with startling clarity. And there was someone she needed to find before the authorities did. A man with kind eyes and a gentle touch. As Edward and Jenna navigated the neon-drenched streets, their paths drawing ever closer, neither fully remembered their cosmic love. But something deeper than memory pulled them together. A bond that transcended time, space, and even identity. Days passed in a blur of investigation and near misses. Edward found himself questioning his mission, doubt gnawing at him each time he glimpsed a woman with impossibly bright eyes or heard a laugh that sent shivers down his spine. Finally, in a rain-soaked confrontation on a rooftop, Edward came face to face with the alien fugitive. Jenna stood before him, her cybernetic arm raised in defense, her eyes a swirling mix of fear and recognition. Do I know you?" Edward asked, his gun lowering despite years of training. Jenna's breath caught. I think I've been searching for you my whole life." As their eyes met, memories came flooding back. The bottle, the wishes, the cosmic trial. It all crystallized in a moment of blinding clarity. "Jenna," Edward breathed, closing the distance between them. I remember everything." Their lips met in a kiss that sent shockwaves through the city's power grid. Reality shimmered around them, and when they broke apart, they found themselves in a new world. Gone was the cyberpunk dystopia. Now they stood in a lush forest, the air thick with magic. Edward wore the robes of a wizard, while Jenna's form shimmered with fey energy. "Well," Jenna said with a wry smile, "it seems our cosmic judges have a flair for the dramatic." Edward chuckled, taking her hand. "As long as we're together, I don't care what reality we're in." And so began their journey through a tapestry of alternate worlds. In each, they found each other anew, their love growing stronger with every trial overcome. They were warriors in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, rebels in an oppressive space empire, and ordinary people living through extraordinary times. Through it all, the core of who they were, Edward's steadfast devotion and Jenna's boundless wonder, remained constant. Finally, after what felt like lifetimes, they found themselves back in the cosmic nexus. The enforcers awaited them, their forms somehow less intimidating than before. "You have proven the strength of your bond," the leader intoned. "It is unprecedented." The smallest enforcer stepped forward, its form now unmistakably smiling. "In light of your extraordinary journey, we have reached a decision. Jenna, you may retain your cosmic nature, but you are no longer bound by the old laws. And Edward, you will be granted the lifespan to match your wife's, that you may explore the cosmos together." Edward and Jenna embraced, joy radiating from them in palpable waves. "Thank you," Edward said, his voice thick with emotion. "But what about Earth, our home?" The enforcer nodded. "You may return if you wish, but know that your experiences have changed you. You will see your world with new eyes." With a gesture, a portal opened, showing Edward's familiar apartment. Hand in hand, Edward and Jenna stepped through. They materialized in Edward's living room, the air shimmering briefly around them. Edward looked down at himself, half expecting to see wizard's robes or a space captain's uniform. But he wore his usual jeans and t-shirt, the only difference a faint, starry glow emanating from his skin. Jenna stood beside him, her form a perfect blend of human and cosmic. Her eyes swirled with galaxies, but her smile was pure Earth girl. A pounding on the door startled them both. "Mr. Paul, this is Agent Carter. We have a warrant to search the premises." Edward and Jenna exchanged a look, years of shared adventures reflected in their eyes. "Ready for one last challenge, my love?" Jenna asked, a mischievous glint in her starry gaze. Edward grinned, squeezing her hand. "Always." He opened the door to find Agent Carter and her team, their faces a mixture of suspicion and awe at the subtle otherworldliness emanating from the couple. "Agent Carter," Edward said calmly, "I think it's time we had a talk about the true nature of the universe." What followed was a conversation that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Edward and Jenna became ambassadors between Earth and the greater universal community, ushering in an era of unprecedented growth and discovery. Years later, on a quiet evening, Edward and Jenna sat on the roof of their home, now a hub of interstellar diplomacy. The stars glittered overhead, more familiar and yet more wondrous than ever before. "Do you ever miss it?" Edward asked, his fingers intertwined with Jenna's. "The bottle? The wishes? The old life?" Jenna smiled, starlight dancing in her eyes. "Miss it? My love, that was only the beginning. Our greatest adventures are still to come." As if on cue, a shooting star blazed across the sky. Or perhaps it was a visiting alien ship. In this new world they'd helped create, it could easily be both. Edward leaned in, kissing his cosmic bride as the universe unfolded around them, full of endless possibilities. Their journey had only just begun.